And welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell, and today's webinar is Experience Epic Iceland, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Lianne Thompson. Thank you so much for being here today, Lianne. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Brooke, and thanks everyone for joining today. As Brooke said, we are going to talk all about Iceland. I've been guiding here for a number of years, and it is just a pretty magical place. So I'll do my best to share some of that magic with you this afternoon, but hopefully you'll be able to join in on an adventure here. So we'll get started. I'll introduce myself, I guess, a little bit further. So I'm Lianne Thompson. Yeah, I'm one of the expedition leaders that works for NatHab. I currently live in British Columbia in Canada. I've been guiding with NatHab since 2018, do a variety of their trips, some of them just in my backyard here. We've got the Canadian Rockies trip, polar bears, northern lights, belugas, a whole bunch of different ones. But Iceland certainly holds a very special place in my heart, not only the itinerary, the landscape, but also the people. So if you get a chance to go to Iceland, the people there really do make it an extraordinary place. But I'll gush about them a little bit later on in the webinar. But it seems like kind of a strange spot to start, but yeah, we'll talk about the structure of the Earth, but it does relate directly to Iceland because I think in order to understand why Iceland is such a magical place, we have to understand why it's so unique on our Earth and like how it is formed, and that has shaped so much of the landscape that we'll see, why the wildlife is there or not there, and whatnot. So we'll just start and quickly talk about the geology of Iceland. I know that sounds scary and it's not going to take up the bulk of this webinar. I know that's not what it's about, but we do need to talk about it. So first of all, we'll say the structure of the Earth. This is something that is probably quite familiar to you. We obviously have the outer crust, which is where we hang out. We have the mantle, and then we have the core, so the inner and the outer core. So that's what's kind of making up the entirety of our Earth, and it is these three components that are interacting with each other that then influence what we call plate tectonics. And plate tectonics may or may not be familiar to you. Some people, when they think of plate tectonics, they immediately think of Pangaea. And so Pangaea is actually a supercontinent, which is something that has happened numerous times over Earth's history, because the idea of plate tectonics is basically a scientific theory describing the motion of the plates and how they move on Earth's lithosphere. So all these different plates that are moving around, and it's a result of the heating and cooling within the Earth's core interacting with the mantle, and then of course with the crust where we are hanging out. So the breakup of Pangaea, when all of our continents were together, then as it broke up, then it has created the organization of the continents as we know it today. So you can kind of see that from the before and after. But when we talk about our plate tectonics, the plates are moving and shifting, but they move and shift in three primary ways. So we can have a convergent plate boundary, and this is essentially when plates are coming together, and then they can go smashy, smashy. And depending on what type of plates they are, one can subduct underneath. They can kind of smash and do a lot of upholding and creation of mountains. So we've got convergent is when the plates are smashing towards each other. Divergent is just the opposite of that, of plates moving away from each other. And then transform, I've also heard this called passive plate boundary, but it's just kind of when they're sliding along each other, not smashing, not moving away. They're just kind of sliding along each other. So these three different types of movement is how we have gotten the orientation of the continents and of how we know it today. And in Iceland, the one that is super important to talk about is that one in the middle. It's that divergent plate boundary, because the entire country sits on a divergent plate boundary. And this again might be something that is familiar to you if you've heard of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It's essentially this ridge line, and it's over 65,000 kilometers, and it kind of runs a bit like almost like a baseball seam, or seam on a baseball. And so it's got this whole ridge line, and those plate boundaries, they're kind of moving away from each other. So on the left-hand side, which is where that arrow is, this would be the North American plate, versus the right-hand side, right in that top, then it'll be the Eurasian plate. And those plates are actively moving away from each other. And then you'll see exactly where Iceland is. It is sitting directly along this mid-Atlantic ridge. And if we zoom in a little bit closer, on that ridge point, then we can see that here, North American plate, Eurasian plate, they are actively moving away from each other at a rate of about 2.5 centimeters per year. And so this means that the land of Iceland is growing by 2.5 centimeters on average per year. So it's pretty cool to think that that exists, but then your brain might think, well, what about the rest of the mid-Atlantic ridge? Why don't we see a whole set of countries or a mountain range? There is a mountain range. It'll just be along the ocean floor, and so we actually don't really see it. And so there is a second factor that is leading to the creation of Iceland. So the first one is that mid-Atlantic ridge, that divergent plate boundary. But the second factor that makes Iceland unique and means that we have Iceland is something called a hotspot. It's also often called a mantle plume. And to understand why this might exist, we go again back to kind of our tectonic plate movements. So if we've got a convergent tectonic plate area, so plates coming together, one can subduct underneath the other, and then portions of that subducted plate can kind of break off. And then since they're cooler and more dense than the mantle that exists, they often sink down towards the core and then essentially create this concentration of minerals and material for radioactive decay. And it creates a whole lot of heat right at the core. And then that core heat just pushes upwards and the material starts to rise until it can break through into our lithosphere and create Iceland. Super simple, right? That makes all the sense in the world. There are 36 hotspots in the world. No, I cannot name them all, but you'll probably be familiar with a couple of them. Hawaii is another example of a hotspot that exists. But the difference between Hawaii and Iceland is that Hawaii is on one singular plate. So that hot spot happens, and the hot spot happens, but then it moves, the plate moves over top of it. And so that's why we end up with this whole chain of islands versus a hot spot with Iceland on top and the plates just moving away from each other, kind of at a sort of central core. Then it's just kind of constantly influencing the growth and the development of Iceland. And I have this lava lamp next to it. A lot of people like to compare mantle plume or a hot spot similar to like a lava lamp. The light bulb generates heat towards the bottom, and then the contents of what's within the lava lamp, then they just move up and down and up and down. It reaches the bottom, it becomes really hot, it goes up towards the top, it cools down, it comes back up and down. So thinking of a lava lamp, many, many lava lamps existing in our kind of core mantle and up into our lithosphere. So the hotspot underneath Iceland is about 100 miles wide, 700 miles deep, and was actually created more than 50 million years ago. So it's been a hotspot in existence for many, many years. So yeah, this is just kind of bringing them back together. So we've got the hotspot as well as the mid-Atlantic ridge and that divergent plate boundary, and together they do create Iceland. Now, Iceland itself really only formed when we talk about the land formation maybe 20 to 25 million years ago, and that just has to do with the plate movements happening. The hotspot has existed for longer, but it being in that mid-Atlantic ridge area is kind of newer. And when we talk about current eruptions and what eruptions are happening in Iceland, it can be a difficult language to understand sometimes because Iceland has about 130 volcanoes, and they say that 30 are currently active, but your definition of an active volcano is probably different from the definition of an active volcano in Iceland, because some of the active volcanoes haven't erupted for several decades, but are still considered an active volcano. There's a lot of research that goes on in studying these volcanoes because some of them, if they erupt, they can have really severe impacts on people who live there, even globally. I'm sure you're familiar with 2010's eruption that happened in Iceland and the events that happened globally as a result of the ash that kind of spread around. So the researchers in Iceland are constantly tracking these volcanic systems systems. But yes, there has been this area on the map on the kind of top left. You can see I've got an orange circle around the Reykjanes Peninsula, and there's been repeated eruptions happening there 2021, 2022, 2023, 2025, even kind of in various areas along the peninsula there, but fairly consistently. Again, these researchers kind of track movements of things, and it is actually expected that along the peninsula area that we're probably in a time frame of potentially like 100 years of having a lot of activity specifically there. And you can see in that picture that that mid-Atlantic ridge kind of running right through, and then in that comparison is where a lot of these active volcanics or the volcanic systems are. So it makes total sense why the volcanic systems are the way that they, like where they are in Iceland when we look at the presence of that mid-Atlantic ridge. So yeah, lots of eruptions happening. I've tried to keep on top of it. To my knowledge, it is not currently erupting, but I will admit I did not Google it this morning, and things do change pretty quickly. I think that there was one in April that erupted in the peninsula. They're all kind of roughly in the same area. And people always ask if we're including going to an eruption on our itinerary. And the answer is no. And that's just because it's way too hard to track, predict, and therefore plan for going to an eruption site. The sites get closed down regularly. Sometimes when an eruption happens, the site never opens and people are not allowed to go because it's just not safe, whether it's the land underground, whether it's the gases that are coming out from the eruption. There are regulations about whether you can or cannot visit an eruption. Sometimes we can't visit them because in order to see the eruption, we would have to maybe hike for 22 kilometers to get in there, which is just not feasible for our groups. So it is not planned for us to go visit the active volcanoes if they are happening on our itinerary. If it's something that you're wanting to do, I recommend just keeping up to date with what's happening with it, maybe booking flights in early or staying a little bit later and seeing if you can try your luck at trying to go and get to the eruptions, because it is really cool. It's definitely cool. I've been able to go see a few of them. So if you have the opportunity, I would highly recommend it. But it is something that's just impossible for us to plan for in terms of the itinerary and getting people there. So anyways, that's a little bit of a background, a geological background of why Iceland exists. We could go on that for the entire hour or more on the trips. We do talk a lot about geology. We try to get hands-on with some of the rocks. People leave Iceland definitely thinking that geology is a pretty cool thing. Even myself, when I started guiding there, I was like, oh gosh, I have to get into geology now. All right, let's buckle up. But Iceland will get you. Geology is really cool there, and it's a lot of fun to talk about. So it'll certainly be a topic that is heavily discussed on our itineraries. All right, we'll move forward from there. And you must be thinking that this small, like volcanically active island in the middle of the ocean is probably got some extremes in weather. And you would be correct. We can have sunny, beautiful skies. We can have incredible winds that literally are hard to stand through. You can have absolute torrential downpour of rain, and you can even have snow. I have experienced a blizzard on our trips. I've experienced snow. I've had times where we cannot get to where we need to be because of the presence of snow, and this can happen at all times of the year. You cannot really avoid it. The weather is just unpredictable. So there's lots of weather, and so being prepared for it is certainly key. In the next one, we'll get into a packing list. But the other thing that I want to talk about is daylight. We're running our trips in July, August, and September, and certainly in July, and as we move into August, there is a lot of daylight. It being so far north, there's almost 24 hours of daylight. During the times that we're there, obviously, as we move throughout the season, it's much less daylight, but thankfully, the hotels have combated this and they do have darkening curtains. But if you are particularly sensitive to it, bringing things like eye masks can help you sleep. But I've never found it necessary, and I do like sleeping in the dark. So the curtains do a pretty good job. But lots of daylight, which just means that we do end up also having some pretty long days because we want to capitalize on the light when we're out there. We want to see as much as we can and experience as much of Iceland as we possibly can. But it is important for you to be prepared for weather of all sorts. And to do that, we must pack for all of these things. Waterproof hiking boots, probably our most important things. You want to make sure that they're comfortable on your feet because you'll be in them quite a bit. I do also bring a second pair of shoes with me, something that's quite comfortable, because the hiking shoes, yes, we'll need quite a lot when we're on the trip, but do you want to wear your hiking shoes down from or at the hotel just down for dinner? You are, of course, welcome to do that, but it's nice to have another pair of shoes that you can wear. Even sometimes when we're on hanging out on the bus, people will wear their comfortable shoes and change into their hiking boots occasionally when we arrive. So definitely recommend having waterproof. Waterproof is the key word there. Hiking boots as well as comfortable shoes. Waterproof, you'll see it again, rain gear, jacket, and pants. Hopefully you're getting the theme here. We want to try and make you as waterproof as possible. And even if we've got glorious weather planned, which, I mean, I don't think it's very fun to go to Iceland and experience only sunshine for 11 days. It's not very probable, but also a lot less fun. Even if that were the case, we go to visit some waterfalls, and some of the waterfalls you can get really close to. And if you want to get that close, you're going to get wet. So even sometimes on super sunny days, I'm out there with my raincoat and my rain pants just specifically to try and stay dry, but getting close to these waterfalls. So yeah, waterproof. And you can certainly check the waterproofing of it. Go stand in the shower. Is it actually waterproof or is it water resistant? Those are different things. Layers, layers, layers. Layers will be key. People constantly asking us, what should I wear today? And we certainly will give some guidelines, but it is important to recognize that your comfortable body temperature and my body temperature, how we experience things, they're going to be quite different. I live in Canada, and yes, I've told you to wear comfortable shoes. I am known for wearing sandals around much of Iceland, and people on my trips look at me like I'm absolutely crazy. Even some Icelanders look at me like I'm absolutely crazy, but it's what my feet are comfortable with. But that means that I can kind of tolerate colder temperatures than maybe you can. So our layer system is pretty key for this. So we'll have a base layer, having sweaters, having gloves, definitely having like a beanie, a toque is what we call them here in Canada, but having those hats will be something that's super, super important. Guides, we often go by the mantra of it's better to have them and not need them than to need them and not have them. Throughout our day when we are traveling, you'll have a day pack with you. So we've got that as a recommendation here. Oftentimes that backpack is a great spot to put extra layers. Sometimes even if I've got a sweater on, I have a sweater in my backpack, especially if I see that the weather is quite wet, because if we've done a morning activity and I've gotten wet, I can swap out that sweater, put on a dry sweater, and be good for the afternoon activity. So having layers, having options, those things are super important. If you're a person that uses trekking poles, we do have trekking poles available to you at any time on the itinerary. So feel free to ask. Of course, you're welcome to bring your own, but in order to help with space saving, then certainly skipping bringing the trekking poles is an easy one to do because we've got lots of them available. You can check the pre-departure briefing for a really comprehensive list of everything that we can suggest, because I will bring a t-shirt or two and maybe a pair of shorts. Some years I've used them, some years I just carry them around and they see Iceland from a suitcase. You can bring those types of things. And sometimes, again, if you run really hot, then you'll wear shorts more often than I will. So check it out, but be kind of comfortable in all weather. Bring a travel adapter as well. You'll definitely need those when we are in Iceland. Bathing suit is also a good one. We do visit a hot spring on our time. So if you want to visit the hot spring, then having a bathing suit is helpful. All right, what happens? You've made the flight, you've landed here in Iceland. Immigration is usually pretty quick. I've never hung out in an immigration line for very long. They are quite efficient. Then when you arrive, NatHab will have organized a shuttle for you. So it'll pick you up at Keflavik Airport, because that's not in Reykjavik. It is about a 1 hour drive from Keflavik to Reykjavik City. The hotel time check-in is 3 p.m. So you're welcome to drop off luggage there. Most of the flights do arrive in the morning. I know that there are some that take off or that land at different times, but I would say most of the flights land in the morning. I'm typically landing into Iceland around 7 o'clock in the morning. Collect your bags, get through immigration, get a shuttle into the town. You're there kind of early to late morning, depending on how quickly things are going through. And so just think about a tiredness level that you might have. Sometimes people will book a hotel room for the night before so that when they arrive at 10 a.m., they're able to check right into their hotel. If you don't do that, you are welcome to leave luggage at the hotel, Hotel Saga, where we are, and just go wander around. The spot of our hotel is right in downtown, so there's lots of stuff to wander around and keep you busy. I have also spied people napping on the couches in the lobby as well. So lots of options. ATMs are pretty available. Cash, you can get cash out at the airport. You can do it in a couple of the spots in Iceland as well, and credit cards are pretty readily accepted. So you can kind of use all of those things. All right, we have our map of Iceland. Maybe you're able to figure out exactly where we are when we start our trip. If not, here's a lucky little star, so we can start there. So Reykjavik, we will then go on our itinerary. We kind of travel down the southeast coast and we get to Vik. So our second star has appeared there. The next day, you'll see we do a whole lot of coverage here, traveling through areas of lots of ice, but we get over and experience some of that ice. Then we'll continue on. We go up into the highlands and we spend some time in the highlands. We get over to Lake Meavat area before we end up in Akureyri. And then from Akureyri, we hop on a plane. That plane takes us over to the West Fjords, and that is where we have our conclusion to our trip. We'll spend the last couple of days in the West Fjords, and then we have a flight that takes us back down to Reykjavik. So there is a whole lot of land to cover. It's a big country. It's a small country, but it's also quite large. It does take us time to get there. And to do that, we use a variety of means of transportation. The top left we've got is our bus, and our bus system is what we will use from when we leave from Reykjavik and we head around until we get to Akureyri, of course, before we fly. So we have a local guide, and all of our local guides are absolutely phenomenal. You'll bond with them. You'll get to know them. You'll laugh with them. It's so much fun. But they will be driving our buses. So they'll just be us in the bus, and we will take our time through there. And so because it's a small country, but a lot of it, it does mean that we do have periods of time where we spend we do have periods of time when we're in the bus for a journey. We do make stops along the way. Of course, we're not just driving it all day. We've got many, many stops, but there are stints that we're in the bus for 2 hours, sometimes a bit more. And so we just kind of settle in and we'll talk through what we're seeing while we're on the bus. There is microphones for us guides sitting up at the front, and we'll share lots of information with you. And so it's a great time to just kind of sit back, relax, and enjoy the scenery. There's so much scenery to look at, and we'll make lots of stops. So we have our bus. We do also have 2 Super Jeep days. So down in the left-hand corner there, we've got our Super Jeeps, one in the Highlands, one in the West Fjords. And so we get into these Super Jeeps. We go kind of like off-roading and into this really rough terrain, and it's a lot of fun. We do also have time when we are on some boats. So for our whale watching, we go on this rib, which is the top right-hand corner, this rigid inflatable boat. You'll see they're in their super fancy suits. So you do get a full suit when we go out in our whale watching. So that's good for waterproofing, but also nice and comfy, cozy, full of layers. And we just add more layers underneath to help us stay warm. So we go in that. Bottom right, you'll see a boat called Iris, and this is in the West Fjords. So we use that to get from Isafjord over into the nature reserve. From that, we will also hop on a Zodiac, and then we do kind of a shore landing and hang out. So lots of different modes of transportation. Lots of different ways for us to get from places. Accommodations we'll quickly talk about. We choose places, not specific accommodations. And in Iceland, the accommodations are quite basic. They're really nice, don't get me wrong, but they're not full of a lot of, kind of North American style extras and comforts and things. The rooms are comfortable, but they're very basic. They're clean, they're warm, they're dry. You'll get a great night's sleep. They have those darkening curtains. But yeah, they do also have European style beds. So instead of having like a king bed, it's twin beds, so they can separate them, but then they can push the twin beds together and zipper up and then cover that with a sheet. So if we've got a bigger bed, then that's kind of what it is. You'll also be able to kind of see in some of these pictures is that there's separate blankets, even if it is a large bed put together, two people sleep in there, you each do have your own blanket, love it or hate it, it's the system that exists there. Bathtubs, pretty rare. We don't really see them. They are stand-up showers. There's nothing super fancy about the bathrooms, but the accommodations that we pick for, we go for based on location. We pick the nicest ones available in the spots that we want to be versus going out of our way, adding extra drive time to go stay perhaps in a city that has more amenities, but then having to add all that time of driving. So we stay in some rustic but really wonderful accommodations. So you'll get good sleeps. I always sleep well in Iceland. Next thing that's important is to talk about food. If you like lamb and or fish, boy, oh boy, is this the itinerary for you. Lots of lamb, lots of fish available. If you are not a lamb or fish eater, don't worry, there's always alternatives. But certainly we always recommend, like, if you really do love chicken, if you see it, just eat it because it's probably not going to be available very often. The hotels all offer continental breakfasts, and the continental breakfast is quite different from what a North American style is. People are always well fed, but they do have things like cured meats and eggs and homemade bread, fruit and veggies, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not just like a muffin and send you along your way. There's lots of food that's available. We will have some packed lunches, so doing a bit more of a picnic style one. We do also have some sit down lunches. There are a lot of areas in our itinerary where there are set menus, meaning we go to a hotel and all 12 of us or 13 of us on the itinerary sit down and we eat the exact same thing. And this is just something that's come out of the hotels and restaurants themselves, trying to manage all these different groups coming through because we are not the only tour group going through Iceland. It's just too impossible for them to stay on top of things and have everyone order a la carte. So we have set menus just so that we can try and make our meal service fairly quick. We do also do a lot of pre-ordering of meals. This is probably the thing that guides and our office staff laugh at and cringe at the most. Yes, sometimes we will ask you what you want to eat 3 days from now. It does happen, but that's okay. But the food is plentiful, the food is delicious, and all the time our dietaries will be covered. So don't worry about food, we got you. Iceland people. I wish I could have like 90 slides on Iceland people, but unfortunately I cannot. We'll meet local guides, and this includes local guides that are with us for like the first 6 days of the trip, guiding us and driving us. We'll also meet, like local walking tour guides and glacier guides and Super Jeep drivers, and every single one of them is incredible. They're all so kind and so lovely and have really wonderful, fascinating backstories. So I always encourage people to try their best to engage in locals because they're so wonderful, and it really adds a lot to your experience if you add that into it. You will get what you put into it there. So talk a lot to the Icelandic people. They're fabulous. They might be blunt at times, but they are so wonderful. I adore them. All right, we'll talk a little bit more about itinerary stuff now. Waterfalls, do you like them? If you do, you should go to Iceland. There are thousands of waterfalls. Everywhere you look, there is a waterfall. Don't get sick of waterfalls in Iceland. They are phenomenal, and we will visit several of them. And these sites, they can be quite busy. When we talked about food, I mentioned that there are other tour operators coming through. And if we want to see these locations, you can't blame the fact that other people are wanting to see them too. So yes, NatHab, we do our best to try and get isolated experiences when we can, and go at times where perhaps there'll be less people there, but ultimately it is a very popular country to visit, and so there's going to be crowds at many of these places that we go to. So, but who can blame them? Look at how pretty these areas are. The other thing that we try to do is build in a little bit of flexibility. I mentioned how challenging the weather can be. And so depending on what our weather is, sometimes stops can take a really long time because the sun is out, it's beautiful, maybe there's puffins there or something's going on. Other times it is a quicker stop because it's a bit colder, it's really windy in this one location and whatnot. And so the expedition leaders and the local guides, we do know a whole lot of extra locations that we can go to, and we'll build in some of these extra stops. And it's one of the things that makes Iceland great is that you can't visit everything. Even on my days off, I've spent a lot of time exploring more regions of Iceland. I could spend probably every single day for 5 years straight, and I would still barely scratch the surface exploring Iceland. So there's always lots of cool things to see, and we do our best to add in those whenever we see possible. So lots of flexibility to make these stops. They're more meaningful for groups, and then we can work with the weather that we've got. But one thing that is included on our trips, obviously our waterfalls, but also we have an entire day devoted to glaciers. You've probably heard that Iceland is the land of fire and ice. So if we talk about fire, we'll talk about geology and eruptions and all that kind of stuff. But ice is super important too. About 11% of the land area of Iceland is covered by glaciers. And so we do have an entire day of the itinerary devoted solely to that. So in the morning, we do go on this glacier walk. We'll meet with glacier guides. We get outfitted with the equipment that we need. There is walking on the glacier itself is actually not very difficult because you've got spikes, you've got the crampons on your feet. We'll move at a pace that works for people, but you do still need to be able to navigate over some rougher terrain. You do still need to have some stability and some balance, and you will need to have higher up boots for your hiking shoes. They don't allow ankle hiking shoes. If you've got ones that go below your ankles, if you have them, you'll simply just need to borrow shoes from the glacier guide so that they are covering above your ankles so that they can give you that extra ankle support. So sometimes a bit of steep walking can be a bit nerve-wracking for people walking on the ice, but we take our time. And there is also alternative options if you want to come to Iceland, but perhaps the glacier walk sounds like it would be a bit too challenging for you. We have alternative options as well. Our local guide can stay back and they can take you to places as well. So easy to work with. So we have a chance being on the glaciers themselves, but also we then later on in the afternoon go on a Zodiac cruise in this glacial lagoon. So it's an entirely different perspective of seeing a glacier. Instead of being on top of it on kind of this smoother section and working your way up, we get right down into the glacier or into the lagoon and kind of come up to this wall that you can see in this picture, this wall of the glacier itself. So it's a really unique opportunity. Obviously, calving events happen sometimes, and though we can't really see it in this photo, there's often big icebergs that are around in this lagoon, and we kind of go cruise around them, and yeah, just have a great time. So an ice day, lots and lots of ice for us to see. And while Iceland is not known for its wildlife, we are going primarily for scenery. We are going to explore the wildlands themselves. We will still look for wildlife whenever we can. It is not a wildlife-centered trip, but we'll look for wildlife whenever we can. So things like seals. There are a few seals that sometimes we see. Mainly it's harbor seals. Gray seals are often, like they're also around, but you don't really see them very often. So harbor seals. When we're in the glacier lagoon, this can be a fun spot to see them because there is actually a little river stream that connects the lagoon to the ocean, and sometimes the seals come in and plop themselves and hang out in the lagoon. But pretty much anytime we're driving directly along the coastline, when we're in the West Fjords exploring, if we're on the Rib, if there's water and there's coastline, we will be looking for seals to see if the seals will haul out. So we'll be looking for our harbor seals. When we explore the Highlands, we have specifically said exploring the Highlands. It's really hard to set an itinerary of things that we are for sure going to do in the Highlands. We've tried it. It doesn't really work because the weather is so variable. And even though the Highlands is not this like cute, well, it's quite a large area, but the area that we can cover in a day trip, it doesn't seem like it's that big, but the weather from here where we could go and the weather from here where we could go can be completely opposite. So what we're going to do in the Highlands does depend entirely on what the weather says is available. We don't want to bring you places where the experience is going to be miserable. So we want to adjust and adapt and make it so that our time in the Highlands is spent exploring in comfortable conditions, as comfortable as we can make them, of course, in Iceland. So we do have some hiking that we can do, can be up to 3 miles. Again, the terrain isn't too difficult, but having good hiking shoes is great. Using trekking poles, there's lots of help that's available. And knowing that everything is optional. Everything on the itinerary is optional. If you want to skip things, please do what's right for you and what's right for your body. But in the Highlands, we'll be looking for more waterfalls. We'll be looking for potentially natural hot pools. There's like troll rock walls. Believe it, it's fun. Canyon walks that we can do. There's so much to do in the Highlands. So we'll just do what's best for the group and what's best for the weather, and just have a ton of fun exploring the Highlands. And it's kind of in this area. So when we are cruising along, we leave our glacier lagoon day, our glacier day, and we're in an area of the East Fjords as we head up into the Highlands. And between the East Fjords and the Highlands is actually when we have the best chance of spotting reindeer. So there are reindeer in Iceland. There are no domesticated reindeer. They are all wild reindeer. These were all introduced. There were 4 groups introduced to Iceland between the 1770s and 1780s, and the idea was to introduce them to establish new sources of meat, maybe transportation, but use the reindeer for what they needed to be. They released these 4 groups into different areas of Iceland, and unfortunately 3 of the groups were completely unsuccessful. They all died, they all perished, with the exception of this group that's in the East Fjords. So it's the only region in Iceland where we can still see them. So the second we kind of enter into that territory, we're on the microphone and we tell people so that everyone is keeping an eye out, because it's really fun to be able to see them. It is a permanent population that's been there for quite a while. Estimations for populations, I've read 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. I'm not exactly sure how many, but several thousand of them. And there is still an active hunting season for them. So you do see reindeer meat sometimes on the menus of places. It's something that I'm quite comfortable eating because the reindeer were introduced. There's no natural predators. And if people are not controlling the population of the reindeer herds would get out of control. So people do manage them, and they have an active hunting season for them. So they must be culled. But either way, it's super duper fun to be able to see them and spot them. So keep your eyes peeled for them. We'll also be keeping our eyes peeled for Arctic foxes, and Arctic foxes are actually Iceland's only native land mammal. They are the only land mammal that has come there on their own volition. Every other land mammal on Iceland has been brought by people. So Iceland has these Arctic foxes, likely when an ice during times of lots of ice, what's the word I'm looking for right now? Glaciation periods. The Arctic foxes will have moved from other countries, maybe Greenland, and come over and help to populate Iceland. Again, finding out their population, 8,000 to 10,000 Arctic foxes living on the island. They can be pretty much anywhere, but we certainly have some hot spots where we tend to see them. East Fjords, Highlands, and West Fjords are the places that I've been able to see them the most. And if you're familiar with Arctic foxes, you might be more familiar with like the white color of an Arctic fox. And that's because most Arctic foxes do change color with the season. They will be white in winter, so they can camouflage well with the snowy landscapes. And the Arctic foxes are often kind of this brown or gray in the summertime, again, to blend in with the landscape. Now, Iceland actually doesn't get completely snow covered all year round all the time. So only about 1/3 of the Arctic foxes change color in the wintertime. The other 2/3 will stay this kind of browner grayish color because they're living in areas where there's not a ton of snow, and so therefore they can blend into their surroundings. But we'll keep an eye out for our Arctic foxes. For once we leave the Highlands, we go head towards the Lake Mevat area. Lake Mevat literally means midge, midges, these teeny tiny little bugs. And so it's literally an area called the Lake of Midges. And yes, at times of year, there are many, 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 many midges. We've got bug nets that we will wear during that time. But the benefit is, yes, Iceland has midges, but Iceland does not have mosquitoes. How great is that? So these midges, teeny tiny little things, they're not coming around biting and attacking you, but they do get quite up close and personal, which is why we wear our bug nets. But they're incredibly important for the ecosystem around there. With these bugs, they help to support plenty of bird life populations, and the impact they have on the ecosystem around Lake Mevat is pretty enormous. So in the autumn, for the autumn itinerary that NatHab runs, we do spend a bit of extra time in the Lake Mevat area because the change of colors is so spectacular. It's really beautiful, and I honestly should have picked a better picture than this for the autumn one, because the change of colors of the willows and everything is quite stunning. I remember when I started doing September trips in Iceland, and at that point, we'll talk more about this, but there's other things that are not available to you. And I was like, well, fall colors. All these Icelanders keep talking about fall colors in Iceland, but there's not a whole lot of trees. So what fall colors are we seeing? And yet it is spectacular. There's willows and lots of other things that are changing colors. We were driving through, getting up to the highlands, and my mind was blown how beautiful it was at that time of year. And if you talk to a lot of the Iceland guides, sometimes it's their favorite time of year. There are less people that come there. You get to have more private areas, really special experiences, and yeah, the fall colors are truly, truly beautiful. So definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested. We do also go to these kind of geothermal boiling mud pot areas. And so there's steaming fumaroles and hot springs, and the temperatures of these like boiling mud pots can be well over like 100 degrees Celsius, quite acidic in nature too. And I always find this quite a unique place to be because we're walking right next to an area with really acidic and really hot temperatures. And then a few feet away, we're able to walk casually. So it's kind of cool to think about how rapidly this ecosystem can shift of being hot and acidic to comfortable for people to be in. That said, it does produce a whole lot of colors around by the mineral deposits. We will experience the smells of sulfur that does exist. It smells a bit like rotten eggs, just as a result of the gases that are present. Is really characteristic of these areas. But I love these spots because to me, it's such a great representation of how colorful Iceland can be. And I think it's fun to go from the highlands where it feels a bit like you're on the moon. And yes, there were astronauts in Iceland practicing moon landings. And then you go to a place like this the next day, and it almost feels a bit like you're in Mars. So lots of cool things to explore there. Also, while we're in the Lake Mevat area, we will meet some Icelandic horses. My first advice to you is do not call them ponies. They are not ponies. They are horses. And Icelanders are very passionate about the fact that they are horses and not ponies. So do yourself a favor. We'll start there. The Icelandic horses, they were introduced again many years ago. Settlers brought them into the country to help obviously settle and make life easier there. And we could do an entire 40 minutes, I think, just on Icelandic horses. They've been bred very specifically over the years, so they've become their own breed, this Icelandic horse. They're smaller, yes, which is why people call them ponies, but we now know not ponies. They're smaller. They do tend to be quite calm and really well-natured. All these characteristics that are true of Icelandic horses. But the thing that makes them perhaps most unique is that they've got unique gaits. So in addition just to the walk, trot, canter kind of thing, one of their most famous gaits is something called a tolt. And it's a fast moving gait that you're going on. You're on the horse, but it's actually so smooth that it's said that you could sit on a horse while it is moving very quickly doing this tolt, and you could have a cup of coffee or a mug of beer, cup of tea, and you wouldn't spill it because it's super smooth. I will say it's tricky on these horses that are used to tourists trying to tell them what to do to get it to the full tolt, but they do know how to do it. But we do go for a horseback riding adventure. It's lots of fun. We get to explore more of the Lake Mevat area, in this area that, all this volcanic activity that has happened there too. And we'll talk more about the geology there. And yeah, it's a great time. The horses are a lot of fun. Variable weather conditions can exist on this one. This is where bug nets, you can kind of see the people on the left-hand side are wearing them. The bug nets can come in handy, but it's a lot of fun to hang out with the horses. If you're not a person into horseback riding, there's also alternative activities for that too. So horses, I guess we could put them as a mode of transportation, but it's a round trip one, so we don't go too far. Then we go head to the West Fjords. And again, in the West Fjords, we do have some built-in flexibility too. We've got a Super Jeep day. We've got days when we're out on the water, but the Super Jeep day is a lot of fun because we don't know what we're going to do each day because it's dependent on the weather, it's dependent on the group and where we'll get to explore. But we go head out in the Super Jeeps and we'll go see some more pretty spectacular scenery. So West Fjords. Also there, we do whale watching. If you come for the autumn itinerary, like I said, we've added that extra time in Lake Mivat, and Husavik is a very popular town, especially for whale watching, and we've actually added it to the itinerary there. So we can go to Husavik and do whale watching when we are on the autumn itinerary. In the summer itinerary, we have our day for whale watching in the West Fjords. And for the autumn itinerary, when you come to the West Fjords, you still have a day out on the boat. So there will be some whale watching happening then as well. But we'll get a chance to try and spot some whales. It's really fun to go whale watching in Iceland because there's just not like boatloads of people around. There are times when you're out on the water where it's just you and your group and your boat, and you're the only ones hanging out with the whales. So it can be really special. Other times, yes, there are other boats that are around, but it's really fun. It's also just such a magical experience to be able to see whales. Primarily, we are looking for humpback whales. You can see a couple other species as well. Things like I have spotted orcas, minke whales. There's other whales and porpoises that you can see, but in general, humpback whales is the ones that we're going to see and have the most success at. And it's really fun to be able to see them because humpback whale populations got absolutely decimated because of whaling, the whaling industry that went on for many, many years. And so the rebound that has happened is pretty remarkable, and it just makes it really special that we're able to see them. So included on both itineraries, both the autumn and the summer, just a little bit different how we're going to do them. On the summer itinerary is where you're going to be maximizing bird time. And this, of course, is our puffins, and it's kind of why we've changed it. More time in Lake Mivat and the whale watching primarily in that area for the autumn, because in the West Fjords is where we'll go try to do some birding. And in the autumn time, in the fall time, there just isn't really much for bird life that's still left. So we want to spend more time capitalizing on the incredible parts when they're available. So for us in the fall, that's being in Mivat. For us in the summer, it's let's spend some time around our birds. The Atlantic puffin, yes, people come from all over to spot the Atlantic puffins in Iceland. It's absolutely incredible. We do try to include it as much as we possibly can when the puffins are available. We'll make stops where we can. If we can do it on the first few days, we'll try for it. But in the West Fjords is where we kind of have our prime puffin watching time. So sometimes it's from the Zodiacs. We do also go on land on an island that's there, go for a walk and go hang out in these puffin colonies. So Atlantic puffins, they look like these little clown birds and they don't look like they would be very tough. And yet they are a bird that spends the majority of their life out in the middle of the ocean, just getting beat up out there. When we see them is when they're coming on land. They are breeding. They're breeding. Their mated pair will have an egg. It'll be in a burrow. That egg hatches. The puffling, which is the name of a baby puffin, how perfect is that? Stays in the burrow. The parents go out. They catch sandlands fish. That's what this puffin has in its mouth. They bring back to feed. And then as the season goes on, as we get into kind of early, mid, late, depends on the year, August, sometimes the puffins will eventually, the adults kind of take off and leave. And then the juveniles, the pufflings, as they get bigger, they eventually come and follow suit. So lots of fun to see the puffins, but it's not just puffins that we're here to see. We've got guillemots and Arctic terns. We've got a whole bunch of birds that we can go and see. So there are still some birds kicking around in the autumn for sure, but there are more. There are just more of them that are here in the summertime. So we'll spend time talking about birds. We'll spend time looking for them and enjoy taking some photos and watching them whenever possible. I've been taunting you with what the autumn looks like, and this is what it looks like. If you are a fan of people, or if you're people that like to follow fall colors around, Iceland should definitely be on the list of places to go. Really beautiful spots, lots of changes in color, so spectacularly beautiful. Again, my mind was blown. The other feature that is sometimes available on the autumn itinerary is our northern lights. Of course, we can never, ever, ever guarantee this, because not only do we dealing with combating the weather if Iceland is cloudy, the areas are that we're cloudy, the aurora activity does not matter because we can't see it, but we also have the aurora activity. So, the guides, we work really hard to keep track of the aurora. We'll track it. We'll see when our opportunities might exist. We will wake you up if the opportunity exists, if you want it, but certainly trying to see the northern lights in Iceland is a pretty spectacular thing. We do have relative success, and this is going to happen towards our late August and our September itineraries, just simply because it gets dark. Remember, we talked about at the beginning how the summertime, 24 hours of daylight, so much so that you're sitting up at dinner and it's 10:30 p.m. and you don't even realize it's that late because it's so bright out. As we move forward in our time, then we get these darker evenings and the possibility of seeing the aurora. So that one's for our autumn itinerary. Almost done. I know we want time for photos. People often ask what gear to bring in terms of photography. So cell phones are great. Always recommend having a cell phone. We take lots of photos with our phones as guides. We can certainly give you tips on that. I do bring, I have an R5, but you can bring a mirrorless or a DSLR camera. I tend to bring a bunch of different lenses. I'm a photographer as well. So I'll have a lens, my 100 to 500 that I'm using primarily for wildlife spotting, but then also have other lenses that are maybe more appropriate for like landscaping and capturing that. Binoculars is also a really good idea, especially if you're a birder. I would recommend that. Sometimes people bring tripods, and certainly if you're a person in the fall and kind of one of your hopes and dreams is that you're seeing the aurora, a tripod is super important for trying to photograph the aurora. We don't have plenty of tripods available for people on our regular departures. So if you are a person who wants a tripod, bringing one that's like lightweight but also sturdy enough that like a wind isn't just going to knock it over is something that I would recommend. But either way, just something that you're comfortable with and know how to use. A lot of cell phones have advanced too, and you can get some pretty cool aurora shots on your cell phones, which again, your guides can help you with. But I do bring a bunch of gear. I've got lots of bus space, and yeah, I'm able to travel with it. Anyways, that'll be where I finish for now. I hand it back over to Brooke so we can squeeze some questions in before we finish. I talked too long about Iceland. I'm so sorry.
Oh, Leah, never apologize for a fantastic presentation like that. Great, everybody. As Leanne said, we have time for a Q&A. So in the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a little questions box. Go ahead and put those in there, and we'll see how many we can get through till the top of the hour. Alrighty. So I think this is a good question to start. You did bring up the midges. Are there any like mosquitoes or more biting type insects that anybody has to worry about?
No, no mosquitoes, as I said, which what a win that is to be in a country that has no mosquitoes. There are some other bugs that do bite a little bit, but I have not found them to be too bad. If you're a person that gets absolutely hammered by bugs, I am one of the lucky few that don't tend to get attacked by bugs a lot. Maybe I would still say to, bring some insect repellent, but in general, we don't really use it. And especially because Iceland is not a tropical place, we often have long sleeves, and then we've got bug nets that we can have for over our face that it doesn't tend to bug too much. So the bugs don't bug too much. There are a lot of midges though. And in certain areas, they're not like everywhere, every day, all the time. Like me, that in the summertime is when they've got a lot of the midges. But in general, I don't find the bugs bad in Iceland.
Okay, awesome. Next, could you explain the seasonality between the trips more? What trips are considered autumn and what trips are considered summer?
So if you go on the NatHab website and if you look at the Iceland trips, there is, when you look at itineraries, if you click that button and you go to it, there is actually, it's listed as summer and autumn. So you can see specifically which dates and what the itinerary and the differences that exist between them. The bulk of the trips that we have are summer trips. We've just kind of got a few of them that are running in the fall each year, just because there, limitations on resources and whatnot that's available, but there is There are two separate itineraries that are listed, and they are called, like, it's an autumn itinerary, so you can see kind of some of the distinctions. But the birds is a big distinction. There isn't puffins in the autumn itinerary. That's kind of the main one that people really need to know. It's very heartbreaking for guides when at the welcome dinner someone shows up and it's like September 11th and they're like, I'm here to see a puffin. I'm like, oh God, how do I crush this person's dreams because we're not going to see a puffin? And then, yeah, in the fall, we've got the fall colors and we have the possibility of the northern lights and just kind of some slightly adapted itinerary. The bulk of the itinerary is still the same because, as I said, the bulk of the itinerary is not wildlife focused, it is landscape focused. We just make changes based on what is available. So,
Perfect, thank you. Next, this is a good question. How do you recommend guests come and keep their backpacks dry? Should they get cover up? Should they get a waterproof backpack? What do you think?
It's up to you, really. I change my mind, I think, every 5 seconds. And some years I've got one that is more of a waterproof bag, but oftentimes I find my waterproof bags are a lot more bulky and maybe not exactly what I'm wanting. And so then other times I'll have just a regular backpack, but it has a rain cover, so I can cover it with the rain cover. I also am a big advocate for dry sack bags. So even if my backpack is pretty waterproof or I'm going to use that waterproof cover, I will have dry sack bags within it. So, if I've got my camera and if, say, we're, out doing something and perhaps I'm wanting to take photos using my telephoto lens, I'll have that in a dry sack bag within my backpack. So it's up to you. You can go the route of full super waterproof. If you don't, then recommended, yes, having that cover that you can add to it on the days when it's more rainy.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Next, what would you say is the average walking distance for a normal day on this trip?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know that I've ever fully calculated it. Some days we'll do less walking than others. Sometimes we just do stops. And the nice thing about Iceland is there is a lot of flexibility to it. If we show up at a waterfall, you could do this whole loop to see the waterfall, or you can just do this part of it and you can still see the waterfall. You just maybe don't get every single angle of it. So each day, maybe like up to 3 miles. And on some of our more like longer hike days, if people are wanting to, again, optional, you could maybe get up to like 3 to 5 miles total per day. But it's not a ton of walking unless you choose that you want to do that route. So, yeah, it's kind of an ambiguous answer, but there's a lot of options. So, and it's not like a hiking itinerary that we're doing, but yeah.
Yeah, and I just received another question that is on the same note. Could you explain a little bit further about the glacier walk and also go a little bit further or repeat the need for hiking boots over the ankles? So could you just go through that experience again around how long it is, what is the difficulty level, those kinds of things? That would be great.
Yeah, oftentimes for people, they'll say that the glacier walk day is the most difficult. And ironically, it's not the glacier walk itself, it's the getting to the glacier walk that is the most challenging. And it's like a 10-minute period that's the most challenging. The glacier guides put us in vehicles, we get as close to the glacier walk as possible, but there's kind of a small switchback that's on kind of like sandy, gravelly terrain. And we switch back up and it legit takes us like 10, maybe 15 minutes, but I think it's even quicker than that to get up there. But it tends to be the most challenging because it's quite steep. Once we're on the ice itself, the ice gradient is not like we're climbing up an ice wall. It's like relatively flat, just with a slight incline. And yeah, you'll get given crampons. And for the shoes, you just need to have hiking shoes that cover your ankle. So some of them are quite low down and almost the ankle is a bit more of like a tennis shoe. So it's underneath your ankle bone versus going on the glacier. The glacier guides themselves, they will check every single person's shoe. And if it's not over the ankle, then they will lend you some shoes. So there is always the option, if you've got hiking shoes that you really like, they're very comfortable, you don't want to buy ones, you can bring those, and just simply for the glacier hike, they can lend you shoes that are higher up on your ankle. And it's just to give you ankle support, because, whenever we're doing any difficult type of terrain, twisting and moving of the foot and the ankle can be the thing that is the most challenging for people. So they just want to make sure that no ankles are damaged in the process. But yeah, hopefully that helps with the kind of more of a description.
Yeah, that helped answer lots of people's questions in that one answer. So thanks for that. Well, Leanne, we are down to the last like 10 seconds of the webinar, so I will go ahead and end the Q&A section, and I would love to turn it to you for any last closing comments.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. If it's not clear, adore Iceland. I think it's a magical place. As I said at the beginning, we'll end that way too. It's a really incredible country to visit. So I hope that you are able to come and join on an adventure. We can see the wildlife, we can see the landscapes, we can meet the people, learn about the history, learn about the culture, and talk about rocks, because rocks are really neat. It's a fabulous place, and I just hope to see you out there sometime. So thanks so much for joining.
Yes, and I see that Odin is making his appearance right behind you.
Yes, finally has made his way.
Yes, yes, he always appears in your webinars, and it's awesome. Well, thanks
Yeah.
so much, Leanne. Everybody, if you have any additional questions, the Adventure Specialist team would be more than happy to look into the trip. And if you're already booked, the concierge team is here and happy to help. But with that, thank you so much, Leanne, for presenting today and getting us all prepared for this amazing trip. And I would like to thank everybody who tuned in. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com on nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.